Jim Moses is a Senior Strategy and Knowledge Officer for Agribusiness Development at the International Finance Corporation, which is part of the World Bank Group. On the IFC website, you say that you support agribusiness development to enhance food security by increasing production, reducing losses, and raising incomes. So this seemed to be like the ideal model to put your money on, though Richard already emphasized that also government support was important, but the way also Nnaemeka was presenting the case, it's a very strong business case to develop this further, scale this up. And so what would the IFC do? Would you finance large-scale this kinds of initiatives, and could you scale this up to the scale we think we would be needed to make this a difference for food security around the world?
Thanks, Rob, and thanks everyone for being here and for this panel. It's a very important topic for us, IFC. As part of the World Bank Group, we are the private sector arm where we do financing through the private sector. That means to corporates and banks. In general, we do larger size investments. We have a large scale of over 100 offices around the world. To give you a sense, we invested ourselves over $18 billion last year, and then mobilized investment from other partners of $9 billion. So that's a big pool. It's the largest investor in emerging markets. That being said, specifically in this sector, our typical investment size we're looking at for ourselves is about $10 million. Okay, and that means that the project size is probably $20 million, or equity investment, for example, about $10 million. Now, Nnaemeka is showing $132,000 in profit for 2018, which is great, but it's a totally different scale. And let me explain a couple of things in terms of how we see this as part of the solution, and a very important part of the solution, why I'm so excited about what you're doing, and how important this is, especially for farmers and for vendors and for nutrition. Not just reducing food loss and waste is great as a thematic area, and obviously there's a climate benefit as well, but it's these other elements about income, nutrition, and food security that really are why food loss and waste is a broad topic to cover these particular issues. When IFC looks at investment, we're looking at the whole value chain and the risk of the whole value chain. And so typically when we have an investment, we're working with perhaps the retailer. When it comes to cold chain, you can be at the farmer level, like ColdHubs, at the aggregator level, like Eugene might be if he was a little more ambitious, maybe with a little more capital and a location. Or typically at the retailer level, which is the pole model. And that could include a retailer like a poultry company, fast food, quick service restaurants, or supermarkets, where they aggregate their supplies because they have the scale to do that. And that's typically where we would invest, whether it's a third-party logistics wholesaler. For example, outside Moscow, we invested $10 million in what was basically frozen and chilled meats for the entire Moscow market of 20 million people, right? And so that one investment has the scale across products to be able to benefit a growing market with middle class and rising incomes and a rising nutrition profile. We also have an investment in India. Snowman Frozen Foods, similarly, is a $6 million investment in equity, so that's small for us. That company went public 3 years later and was worth, our stake was worth $60 million. So you can see how, from an investment perspective, the opportunities can exist, but there's a lot of challenges to overcome. And when we talk about Nigeria, Richard mentioned infrastructure might be 50% of the problem. I think it might be a little higher. So infrastructure, policy, regulations, but then you also have, at each link of the chain, you have gaps. And so it's really important to connect those links. The strength of the chain is only as strong as the weakest link, and I think an opportunity like ColdHubs helps strengthen the farmer link. But there's still many other links to be strengthened. All right. The good news is this puts more of the power and more of the economic opportunity in the hands of the farmer. It's an opportunity for other links of the chain to be to step up, because they'll see more value as well, and at the end of the day there'll be more value created in the system. So I'm very encouraged about the business on a personal level. And
I guess you left us off with explaining the scale that also the IFC needs in order to support these mechanisms, and what it also implies to bring this to scale for also IFC to become a player in this. But let me give you the floor again. Maybe you could pick up from where you left, and then we get back into the issues and to the discussion. Gene.
yeah, thanks, Rob. So yeah, that's exactly, I was building to a crescendo that was going to be. But I was trying to raise the challenges, but I do think there's opportunity for finance here, not necessarily IFC. I think you can see the business model. You can see it's the proof of concept of these pilots. We talked about the scale up and the potential scale up, whether it's 30 units or 60 units. I think once that operational model gets proven, I think there's tremendous opportunity for scale up. The question is, who would finance that? And these days, it's a combination of climate finance. There's a lot of, the climate story is very strong here, and there's money for climate finance. And there's blended finance in the market that works with these high development impact type social entrepreneur programs. So I think it's a good time for you to roll this out. I'd love to see a quicker scale up if that works, but I'm very encouraged by how it's going.
I guess you've cooled things down a little bit by giving these mundane answers. Though I would say is that it's an interesting question for the development of these kinds of initiatives. Just to get from the small scale where you are and then to scale it up. I guess part of your message is we need to clone Nnaemeka several times so we can bring it to scale, as well as get other forms of support and finance to go from the very small scale to the right level, such that it can broaden up.